Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Rhodey, and I am joined alongside a very special guest and good friend, Pat, the designer from Windy City Breeze and ESPN 1000. Excited to have Pat on because I was telling Pat before the show, he's one of my inspirations to start a Chicago sports podcast. He has a fantastic story about where he started and where he is today, and I'm very excited to have him on. Pat, welcome to the show. I can't believe I'm saying that to you, but welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on, brother. It's a pleasure to be here. Real talk, man. I love seeing the growth and the grind. So thank you for having me.
It's what the Bears are doing. It's what we're doing. And Pat, got to ask you out of the gate, as a Chicago guy, and out of everything that you've seen in Chicago history, is the Chicago handshake as good as you think, as outsiders could make it out to be?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't talked to a lot of outsiders about the Chicago handshake, though. Is that a thing that people talk about outside of Chicago?
So everyone asks, so I just got back from Austin, Texas, and everyone's like, what is Malort and what is old style? And I was like, well, first of all, that's a Chicago handshake.
Yeah.
And that's just what starts the whole entire conversation.
But it's good, but it's terrible. It's a rite of, it's not good. It's a rite of passage.
It's a rite of passage. You have to do it if you come to Chicago.
So,
you know that if you go to New York, you got to get some pizza.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't even give it to people who aren't moving here. I usually reserve that. It's like, oh, you got to get a Chicago handshake. It's like, no, I'm usually giving you that. If you're gonna move to Chicago, the last time I gave it to my guy he was coming from Wisconsin to Chicago because he was getting married. But outside of that, I mean, that's interesting that people outside of Chicago are that excited about a Chicago handshake. I'm not going to lie to you. I've never even heard anybody say that. I'll give you a shot of Malort just to screw with you. Exactly.
The old style helps get down. What did they say? Malort tastes like a gym sock that never got cleaned after 8 hours of just straight ball on the court. That's how nasty. If you've never had a Chicago handshake, you have to do it to say that you did it, because that's the pain that Chicago sports fans have felt over the last how many years with the amount of teams that we've had. But guess what? The handshake is going to taste a lot better this year, because we're super excited about this Chicago Bears team. And Pat, to kick things off, a lot of people, we're recording this on July 23rd, 2023. I get off the plane and everyone's acting like we traded for Chase Young. We signed Justin Houston. Every single possible person that's available is still being talked about. So to kind of kick things off, it's a touchy subject with people, but who is the best available pass rusher for Chicago right now based on our defense, what we're kind of going for? Who would, if you're Ryan Poles in his body tomorrow at Hallis Hall, who are you making a call for and who are you signing to this team?
For me, it's still Yannick Ngakoue. There's no question marks with Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, I guess you can question more so of the fit a little bit, but I know he can get to the quarterback. I know that he'll be a guy that brings the focal point of what a defense is. I mean, he's the part that a lot of people miss out on is, we're going to sign this guy. We're going to go add a guy to the Chicago Bears. What's he going to be able to do? This defensive line has a lot of question marks. Whatever guy we're adding, that's now the guy. So you have to not think, what is he going to be able to do? You have to think, what's he going to be able to do when guys are double teaming him, throwing stunts at him, trying to chip him as he comes around, right? Those are the things that you have to think about. And I think that Yannick Ngakoue is the one guy to me that is not affected by any of that, right? He's found his way to the quarterback even when teams try to do that to him. And I think the main thing is any of the other names out there that are serious, you probably have to make a trade for. And in making a trade for a guy, you're giving up assets that could be used to improve the team in the future. And you're basically saying that, okay, now we're all in on you. A couple of those guys have major injury concerns coming into the season as well. So I think that, to me, the best name you could go out there and get would be a guy like Yannick Ngakoue.
So I would love it. I think that it would be a very good move. But the couple of the concerns, playing devil's advocate, so you got the positive. I agree. The dude can take on double teams and still make plays. He knows how to read an offense very well. He has that veteran leadership. but he has hopped around from team to team the last couple years.
Yeah.
And a lot of that inside source is because of how he is in the locker room. And that's one thing that Ryan Poles obviously is, looking out for when it comes to a player. This team, you can see that they're gelling together. No matter the talent level or anything, they're hanging out during the offseason. They're at Hallis Hall with Justin Fields putting in work when they don't even have to be. They're talking, they're interacting, they're traveling. But Yannick, I feel like he has had problems and it's been reported that he has problems in the locker room. That's the biggest concern for me. It's not his athletic ability. And if anything, it would be his run defense. I know that that's been a weaker spot for him, but with the linebacker core that we have and the secondary we have and the speed and athletic ability and the reading up, that I'm not too worried about. I think that people can pick that up because he's created more pressure than anyone else. I mean, Chase Young, we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But it's the culture. And that's my number one. I mean, please comment back if you think it's different. But the culture is what scares me the most because the Bears actually have a good culture for once. And that's weird for us to say. Probably the first time we've had good culture since 2018. And look what happened after that because they added a few guys that were a little questionable in 2019 and it just spiraled. So, that's my feeling toward the situation.
I think I'm not saying there isn't a concern. I think you also have to take into account that some of those teams that he ends up moving on from, right? He ended up going Minnesota to Baltimore to the Raiders
to the Jaguars.
The Jaguars was first, right? Somewhere he ends up getting moved around a lot, basically, right? And to me, I think that he got moved into a lot of spots where he was the best piece that they can move to get better pieces. It's not to say there's an attitude issue there, but he's also looking for a long-term deal for once because he's sick of getting moved around to all of these teams on the last year of his deal and just having to re-sign up. But for me, I think that if he's a cancer in the locker room, you do have to be aware of that, right? Like if he's literally destroying locker rooms left and right with his attitudes, you do have to be aware of that. But I think that it's something that Tommy Waddle always says on ESPN 1000 on the radio, is the juice worth the squeeze? And to me, he's got enough talent in the tank. He's still very young that to me, even with your concerns maybe on the run defense, I think the Bears are going to actually have a pretty good run defense. You look at guys like Andrew Billings, Justin Jones, of course, Dominique Walker, right? Or not Dominique Walker, DeMarcus Walker. Those were guys that were really good run stoppers in their respective teams before they came to the Bears. I think that part's going to actually be a little bit more improved. I think that to me, if I'm looking at a guy like Yannick Ngakoue, I need you for one thing and one thing only. You can be, the loner, you can be the lone wolf. And we've talked there are a lot of players that we just don't hear the stories because they're winning. Right. There's a lot of players that are to themselves, that know that they're the superstar, that know all of those things. Right. And yes, you want that brotherhood. You want that camaraderie. The one thing that I've learned about doing this show with so many Bears players, the Chicago Bears podcast with so many Bears players, is that they love being around each other. I mean, like we just had Thomas Jones on over there and he literally he was just like, I'll do anything for McKee. Like anything he needs. And I was like, you mean like you're like an actor in Hollywood making millions off of movies left and right. And he's like, Jason called me. He's like, our fullback? I love Jason. But but you don't hear those stories usually about a player like that. So I think that the culture is very important, but I also think that if he's got that level of talent and he's to the point where he's looking for a long-term deal, which means he knows he's going to be here 3-4 years at a minimum, he's got to deal with these guys, you may get a better version of Yannick Ngakoue coming in.
One, that's a great way to look at it because you're investing in him and he's going to invest in you. He's still young and he knows that give him an incentive contract, give him an incentive multiple year contract that isn't aggressive towards the cap because you're showing him right there, hey, we believe in you. No other team in the last couple of years has. They've given you these 1 year, whatever deals. You do great. And then they just get rid of you because of this situation. Because you're probably mad that you're not getting extended halfway through the season when you already have 7 sacks and you're leading the league at points. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I know you're going to like this because I know you're a big Chicago Bulls guy, but when you were talking about, being a cancer and, coming into the locker room and kind of setting guys straight, kind of like what Scotty Michael Phil did to Rodman. They sat him down and was like, hey, a lot of the guys on the team don't like you. A lot of people in the league don't like you. But we need you to come in and do one job, and that's rebound and play heavy defense. Sure enough, that's what he did. One of the greatest ever do it in a Bulls uniform.
Now, the difference is at that point, we'd won 3 championships.
That's right. At that point. Okay. You know what I'm saying though? Like,
I get your point, but it's a lot harder to be like, hey, Michael, I don't agree with you. Shut up. I got jewelry. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. He walks in and everyone's saying that to him. Like, do you know what your record was last year? But you know, at the same time, you got a guy like Justin Fields sitting right there that has the immense respect of the league. Like, you know, no jewelry yet. A guy that's entering year 3 doesn't have any jewelry. That's pretty expected. I mean, he's not Mahomes. You know, could have been for the Chicago Bears, but it's just, it's tough. Yeah, I see you looking.
That one hurts. Don't pull the Band-Aid off on that one just yet.
I feel, but I think that the culture that's been built here, and Poles is going to put his fist down and be like, hey, this is what we're doing here. If you don't agree with it, keep walking kind of deal. And he played for the Colts and he still has a lot of connections with the Colts. He can talk to some of these coaches, these other players. So how was he really like? Are these really true? You know, was he upset for certain situations? I agree with you. Give him a 2-year contract. I mean, that's twice as long as he's had with any team in the last 5 years. And he will probably, in theory, perform for you because you're invested in him, and then extend him next year if he does good. But that's kind of where I am. So good points. But going off that, if he isn't the best option, let's just say, hey, he gets signed by somebody else tomorrow. Bears are now down to a few different options. Who's your number 2 guy that you're going after that is worth every dollar that we would potentially have to give up?
It's so tough because to me, the next names are really, really talented guys, but you have to show caution with them. And I think the number 1 guy for me is Danielle Hunter. I like coming off of last season, 2022. He's a 10.5 sack guy. He's a guy that can get to the quarterback. Absolutely has some injury concerns, very much like Chase Young does. In fact, probably more serious injury concerns at the end of the day. But if I was going to make a move for somebody else that I want to have a guarantee on, one, he had 10.5 sacks and his hand wasn't in the dirt. And he just doesn't seem as comfortable playing in a scheme where his hand's not in the dirt. He can't just take off, go after the quarterback. So I think for me, he would be a guy comes in here. He's able to set the pressure off the edge right away. I think that in this scenario, right, like, this is the part that a lot of people don't think about. Bears have money. They have to extend Danielle Hunter. But the only thing, realistically, I think in Bears fans' minds, we won 7 or 8 games last year. We won 3. Like, you have to really convince people to want to be here. Like, this is not an easy, like, yes, I agree that Justin Fields is moving in the right direction. I think the culture is in the right place. We won 3 games last season. That's not easy for somebody who's going out there on a finite amount of time in their career, especially somebody who's had major injuries already. And then just go, hey, don't you want to just come here for the heck of it? Like, just be around? No, like, you got to throw money at these guys. And so for me, I'm looking at a guy like Danielle Hunter. I'm looking at a guy who you can trade assets for, possibly extend him this year, at least let him know, hey, after this season, we're 100% going to be extending you. We'll have the talks during the season. We'll get the deal done by the end of it, blah, blah, blah. And you can still go out and add to your defensive line if you want to by signing a guy like Yannick Ngakoue because you traded away the assets, basically. So I think then you're kind of playing and this is a very optimistic Bears fan right here. You're playing the optimistic best case scenario role. But I think even
the way to do it sometimes.
It's the only way. Even if you go out and get him by himself, though, I mean, if he can stay healthy, you know what he is. You know how he's going to be able to create havoc coming off of that edge. He's going to be back in a more comfortable position for him, playing more in the 4-2-5 nickel. Basically, it's a 4-3, but everybody's playing 4-2-5 now. But the 4-2-5 nickel, right? And I think that those are the things that, if you're going to go after somebody, that's an all-in move. And that to me would be like, that's almost your Khalil Mack move to try and say, hey, we're trying to go out there and get it. Do you want to make that move knowing, right, we're going to get this player. He's still young. I think he's also 27 years old or something like that. But is he actually going to be able to get the job done and stay healthy long enough for you to get the most out of him? That's a tough thing to weigh out.
I mean, he is 20. So he is 28. So he just turned 28. So he is in the prime of his career. He does have those injury concerns. I agree. I think Hunter is probably he's kind of the quieter option. A lot of people are really hung up on Chase Young just because, that Ohio State connection with him in Fields.
Yeah.
What I always say back to Bears fans is, did they play on the same side of the ball? Did they work together? They're doing their own thing on their own sides of the ball, impacting the team differently. It just looks cool in a picture because they were Big Ten, in the Big Ten conference together, or the same team together, Ohio State. I'm very concerned about Chase Young because we don't know what that knee is going to do. That knee is wrapped up in more bandages and more metal than I have ever seen anybody go onto a field. And sure, he's a massive man. I like Hunter too, though. He knows the division, which I think is so valuable. And it's hard to do inter-division trades, but the Vikings are an absolute mess right now. Their front office is worse than the Bears, a couple years ago.
They didn't want to let Ryan Pace rebuild. Remember that. Or Ryan Poles, I should say, rebuild. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. They put themselves, they paid Kirk Cousins too much money, and then now they got, what are you going to do with Justin Jefferson? Those two guys cannot win you games. I mean, he has no offensive line now. His defense is falling apart before his eyes. They're old. And Hunter doesn't want to play on a rebuild team. He is in the prime of his career. So kind of flipping that to kind of what you're saying, yeah, Bears fans could say, yeah, we almost won 8 games. But no, we won 3. But we're going in the right direction. This team was built much better. The most improvements this season, not even being biased. I think if you look at any NFL team, the fact that we still have $38 million in cap on top of it, that we can extend a few key guys that are coming up on contracts. And if we were to trade for Hunter, we can go out and re-sign him as well to give him that, hey, kind of what we're talking about with Yannick. You're investing in him. You're making the team better, but also you're investing in his future. This is where he's going to this is the time of his career where he has to choose. I'm winning a championship with this team, and this is where I'm going to be a superstar on it. It's a big decision for him too. So I hope that Poles can fleece the Vikings if he makes that trade happen. Will he? I don't know. I just love how Poles drafts this team so far the last 2 years. I would hate for him to give up any draft assets, at least early draft assets. You can give up a 6. I don't care. But then again, it could work out. There's always that late round pick but yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's tough.
It's tough because, right, is a bird in the hand worth 2 in the bush. It sounds, very cliche to say, but what Danielle Hunter can do at the NFL level. And a lot of times for me, that is the main. I just dropped the video talking about Claypool. I know we're going to get into that a little bit as well, but I just dropped that video. And the one player that I was talking about looking at closest after he's going down is Velus Jones, because I know what Dante Pettis can do already as a special teams returner. I know what Darnell Mooney can do as a wide receiver. I know what Equinemius St. Brown can do as a number 2. I have these things that I know, and so you being a question mark is an issue for me. The NFL's lifespan is too short. So even going out, right, even the Bears going out and getting a guy like DJ Moore, right? Everybody's complaining about, we gave up the first overall pick. Not everybody. There's a lot of people that were in favor of the trade, but there's still those people out there that are like, we didn't get enough for a guy like that. There's no wide receiver in the draft that was better than DJ Moore, and there's no question about that because I've seen what he can do at an NFL level already. So for me, with a guy like Danielle Hunter, even a Chase Young, right? Danielle Hunter, I'm not going to lie, to me, Chase Young's injury is bad, but I think I'm more comfortable with the medicine on his knee than I am with Danielle Hunter's neck. Yeah, because the neck is such a touchy, one bad hit, and that could be something serious. And he plays a position where he literally gets hit every plays on the field. So it's
was that pun intended, by the way, being touchy with the neck? Because you break your neck. What are you doing? Yeah, I mean, you're not playing in the NFL much longer.
You don't want to be. It's a touchy subject, man. Yeah, I mean, so for me, I think that's why I lean more with Yannick, because the other names that have come up, I'm just like, okay, I get why you want them because of the numbers, but is that production on the field? And think about it, more times than not, the team that makes the trade for a guy, you get a year or 2.
Yep.
And then you start to regret the trade. You start to say, hey, we didn't get what we thought we were going to get for 4 years out of this guy. We got it for 2 and some change throughout. And the other team that has the picks and all of that usually feels better about it. They're like, look at them now, you had a couple of years, you didn't win a Super Bowl with him, so it doesn't matter. So I think a trade like that, you do have to ask yourself the question on, are you going to go out and be able to win a Super Bowl with a guy like that right away? Are you going to be in a position to compete for a Super Bowl? And listen, I've seen a lot of miracles in the NFL, but I don't think the Bears making a Super Bowl in the next year is going to be one of them.
Don't go sleeping on it, though. You never know. You and I could be logging on. You and I could be logging on. I'm going to be, hey, Pat, remember this video?
Hey, man.
You're going to go,
listen, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. I always post that Dexter meme every week with some different player on it, just like, stun on him, man. Just prove me wrong every time.
It's one of the best, especially when it comes to Fields, when everyone's like, but especially last season, it was so much fun. But let's go over to the offensive side of the ball. I think the defense, we are pretty good with. Whatever happens. We'll be talking about it when it does happen, because it's going to be very exciting. But let's go to the offense. News broke today: Claypool on the physically unable to perform list to start camp. Not an ideal situation, but we were talking about it before. There's a positive that people are kind of missing here. And that fact that last week, Chase Claypool was with teammates in Florida, running full speed, full routes, beautiful catches, looks like he's already in midseason shape. The dude's ready to go. Yeah. But this is, you could pull him off the list tomorrow if you want. Like, it just depends on how you go about it. It's safety. The Bears are obviously going to have him on the roster. The Bears aren't getting rid of him because they pretty much gave up the 32nd overall pick for him. Yeah. So they have to believe. But how are you feeling? We talked about it before, but let's try to calm the folks at home down a little bit. Like, this is not as big of a deal right now. If he's on it in 3 weeks, different story. Yeah. But let's, Pat, let's calm the folks down a little bit. How are you feeling about it at the moment?
Well, I mean, it sucks at the end of the day, because the only thing I fear is if this does get into a lengthy situation. We don't know what this is going to be about. We don't know how long this is going to last. They said Flus basically, when talking about it, said it was minor things, something that they were going to pay attention to, day-to-day type stuff. We've seen day-to-day turn into Lucas Patrick missing a whole season, though. So, I'm always scared when they talk about their injuries and stuff like that. But I don't think that this is the end of the world, as long as at some point he can come back during training camp, because I think that that's where you're going to establish that real connection with Justin Fields in there. Also, right, you get the opportunity for other guys to step up. What's a Tyler Scott going to do? Are you going to see more out of Equanimeous St. Brown, who already knows his system like the back of his hand? Are we finally going to see if Nsimba Walker can play football? Those are some of the things that I always try to see that as on the positive side of guys coming out and being able to compete to win a job and maybe prove people wrong. And maybe all of a sudden, right, the coaches are looking at him and they're like, oh man, Equanimeous is a better number 2 than we thought he was going to be. We had him at the 3. Now maybe he's at the 2, whatever that ends up turning into, but it's all about opportunity. And right now there are a lot of guys who have an opportunity to step up. I think my biggest concern is that Justin doesn't throw to guys. And I've seen this now in 2 training camps, basically. If he wasn't with you in training camp, you're probably not getting the ball. So
that's fair. That's like, a good way to look
think about it. N'Keal Harry came back, didn't get the ball. Chase came in the middle, didn't really get the ball when he was on the field, right? Like, you can literally look at all of the guys that Justin Fields, that made it through camp with him, that worked with him, Mooney, EQ, Byron Pringle came back, didn't really get the ball because Byron Pringle missed time during training camp and stuff like that. So I think that that's the part where I'm like, okay, I know how Justin is. Basically, I haven't seen you do this in this situation before, I'm not going to put you in that position now. And I think Chase Claypool is somebody who we need to know, can he thrive in that position? I do think he needs to be at training camp at some point. But like you said, you can pull him off of the PUP list in an hour from now and it'd be nothing.
And I'm happy that they're at least taking it seriously, because he is a potential building block of the future. I mean, he's a crazy athlete. He's shown that he can do this stuff. I mean, think about it. After his rookie season, you take Big Ben away from him. Look what his stats did. You give him a quarterback, he's going to perform. Usually the greats, they work with anybody. But, I'm not saying Chase Claypool is the next Randy Moss, but he is a good player. And I think that he will have an impact on this game. Him and Fields have been working together all offseason. Looks great. Awesome. I love it. You said it best, though. You're not at camp. And that's exactly what happened last year. Everyone's like, oh, Claypool's a bust. First of all, dude came in halfway through the season, had to learn a playbook in 72 hours before walking onto the field. I was shocked Chicago even dressed him for the first game because I thought it was just like a pressure thing. Because now you're like, I'm the new kid in town. Now I got to perform. And he had a catch, but at the same time, like, no, that's not how I did not like how that was handled. That's just a whole nother thing. But it's hard for anybody to do that. That's like starting a new job halfway through a project and you're expected to finish it with knowing everything that happened beforehand.
Yeah.
Now that Claypool is there, and it's just rookies and quarterbacks right now, it doesn't get serious until later this week. Claypool is at least there, and take him off the pup list, whatever. He might turn out great. And everyone's gonna be like, wow, remember when Claypool was on the pup list? And yeah, remember now he's a Pro Bowler? Like, it all works out.
Let's hope.
The season
Let's hope. Let's hope. That's my thing with it. I'm if you're gonna be positive, this is the thing I've learned about all of this, especially being a creator with it. If you're gonna be positive, now's the time to be positive, because a lot of times there's not a lot of positivity during the season.
And that's the other thing too, is that there was never a like room to breathe for him. Like, we traded him. Everyone was like, yes, this is the guy. This is going to turn around our season. Cause we were 3-4 or 3-5 when we got him. We were still, we're coming off that Patriots win, and everyone's like, okay, like we got something going here, and it didn't work. And it was like, I mean, we're Bears fans. It was like, oh,
you don't like
how
this
it guy
goes
anymore.
Yeah.
And it rode with it. So I'm excited. Camp's going to be great, but it does give the opportunity. Now that he is on the public, it does give fans a better opportunity to look at guys like Tyler Scott, evaluate Velus Jones Jr. I know we were talking about him a little bit earlier, and how he might be a roster bubble guy. I mean, I know I talked about on my show a couple days ago when it came to cuts. Things are getting interesting, but guys now are like, okay, this door is open. Not many open in the NFL, and Claypool's had his door open. He's in the door technically at the moment. But it could be exciting to see a little bit of a heated competition at camp, because then it gets a little bit more serious about who the Bears are going to keep at wide receiver. That's just how I look at it too.
Oh, no, 100%. I think that the camp is going to be a very interesting. I think this is going to be one of the most pivotal camps the Bears have had in years, because it's one where you finally get to build on your draft classes. It's one where you finally get to see, okay, coming into the second year of this, who are the guys that are improving? Who are the guys we want to keep around from last year's draft class, or undrafted gems, different things like that, right? I think of Jack Sanborn is as a name that you throw in there as well. Of course, right, like you get Brisker, you get Gordon, and now you're adding on top of that, are you going to be able to have Dexter? Are you going to be able to have Pickens? Like, there's so many things to me that this training camp is going to show us about how this team, if they actually are moving in the right direction. And I'm excited about it. I'm always excited when guys who you didn't think were going to get looks or get the same type of looks are finally going to get some of those looks. And to me, early on, the biggest beneficiary is Tyler Scott, because we know that Justin wants to throw the ball deep. He's got the speed. He's got the hands. Let's see if he can put it together on an NFL roster.
I mean, the kid's so humble too. He does remind me of like a Mooney kind of deal. Not just from his playing ability, but like his off the field personality. Like, Dave over at BFR did a nice interview with him, and he's just a funny guy he's a person. That's the other thing, is that all these people are people. They're not gods. They're not better than anybody.
Some of
them play in the NFL. Some of them. Some of them.
Pat Mahomes a god.
I give him that. Yeah, Pat Mahomes is a god. Okay, you got me there. But very few out of the hundreds of players that are in the NFL and hundreds of coaches, the chances of them being a god is 1 in 500 every single time. So they are people. And I'm excited for Tyler Scott too. If I had to think of two people, and I'm going to choose an offensive guy, Tyler Scott, I'm with you, is my offensive. This is who I'm looking forward to at camp. But at camp for me, it's Rasheem Green. I think he had a 7-sack season with the Seattle Seahawks a couple of years ago. He has so much potential. We picked him up and everyone was like, all right, cool. He might not even make the roster. But you look at what he's doing in the offseason. He's working with everybody. He looks good. He's fast. He's big. He's everything that we've needed, and he's still young. And kind of like Yannick, he's a guy that has to prove something, that he deserves to be on the team, deserves to be in the NFL. And this is the most defensive line help he's had since that 7-sack season in Seattle. I don't know. I think he could be a very big, impactful player. But, Pat, I was going to kind of throw it back to you. Who are you looking forward to on the defensive side of the ball before we go to our last subject?
Who am I looking forward to? I honestly, Eddie Jackson. I want to see how he's coming back from that Liz Frank injury. I want to see how he's going to be able to attack. And I want to see if he still is going to be able to fit in with what the Bears are trying to do long term. Remember, he's a guy that's going to be getting paid again. Are you going to pay him like he's one of the top safeties in the NFL? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like I don't know if I can have that conversation about him yet. So I kind of want to see how he's going to bounce back. Of course, he's not going to be full go yet, but even just the dynamic of how him and Brisker worked together off of each other. I loved that pairing last season.
Like Amos and Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, except, in this situation, I think Brisker's the better of the two because he can do more.
Right.
But just that safety room in general for me. And then if there was another guy on the defensive end that I really wanted to watch close, it's going to be Javon Dexter, because I really want to see how his brain is going to switch from 2-gap to 1-gap and how quickly that's actually going to be, because switching from a 2-gap to a penetrating style. On the Chicago Bears podcast, we have John Yurkovich over there. He played the position. He played nose tackle. He knows what it's like to be there. And he's played both styles of penetrating and 2-gap. And he said going back to penetrating is the easiest thing because you just have to go. And that's what we're trained to do. We're just trained to go. So those would be the guys that I'm most looking forward to seeing on the defensive end.
And when Javon came on a few weeks ago, he actually did say why he was so excited to come to Chicago is because it's the defense that his first year at Florida where he thrived. Yeah, that's going to be back because they switched him. And that's why his draft capital dropped. And I even said that to him. And he, being a player, said, yeah, I think honestly, if I would have stayed in that defense where I performed the best, I probably would have been a higher pick. But everything happens for a reason because he's going to do what he loves for the team that he wants to play for. I mean, that's what I'm so excited about. And, you hit the nail on the head too. I mean, you just go. And when you're that big of a guy and with that much power, Javon Dexter is going to be a huge problem for opposing offensive lines. Super excited about that. But Pat, I'm very grateful that you came on the show. One more question for you today for today's subject is, what coach, I mean, last year, everyone kind of got a freebie. But, it is now that Poles went out and built this team, both sides of the ball for everybody. Out of all the coaches on the Chicago Bears, who is on the hottest seat right now if they don't perform at least halfway through the season?
I think it's two people. I think you're talking about Alan Williams. For sure, because this defense has to perform, right? Like, and we had a ton of question marks with them last year. Even with as bad as we were, it seemed like we were worse at times than maybe we were on paper. And I'm not gonna lie, at the end of the day, listen, you can't have the 31st ranked defense and be a defensive minded head coach. So I'm looking at Flus as well as a guy who, listen, if Getsy's successful, people are gonna look at him as a head coach. Why not the Bears? If Getsy gets Justin Fields to become the first 4,000-yard passer, or he gets Justin Fields to be 3,800 and 500 rushing yards or whatever it is, like, don't be surprised if we get to the end of this season and we're like, yeah, the culture is cool and all of that, but we're not winning as like we thought we were supposed to win. Now I need to look at this guy. And especially to me, if on the defensive end, you're just not performing well. Listen, guys, I get it, right? Nose tackle, very important. That 3 technique position, very important for the Chicago Bears defense that they're going to be run. Edge rushers, very important what the Bears defense is going to run. But we were so bad last season because we had the third guy on everybody's roster as our starters. That's why we you know what I mean? That's why
it's tough. It's the truth.
Especially on the defensive line. So for me now, do I think we have the first guy? Maybe not. Maybe in some of these guys are going to prove that, but maybe not. But I do think we got the second. And if you got a bunch of 2s on your defensive line, you should be better. If this defense does not perform this season and it's still bottom 10 in the league, I think that you might start looking at a guy like Matt Eberflus and say, hey, listen, we get it, right? Like, things are working well for you. And maybe I guess it depends on how he's managing it and how he's managing the team throughout the year. So you also have to take that into account. But it's very tough for me to look at you as a defensive head coach and just be like, so it's okay that your defense sucks, even though that's what you specialize in. Like,
hey, that's honestly, that's the first time. And that's a great way to look at it because, your head coach controls the staff. Your head coach should be going after anybody. Yeah. And the person that needs to hold him accountable is Ryan Poles. Yep. Hey, I gave you everything you wanted. I gave you the staff you wanted and, paid them. I gave you the players you wanted, paid them. Now you got to perform, especially on what you are known for doing is the defensive side of the ball. 100% agreement with you. I'm just going to throw an honorary out there. Someone that's on the hot seat is Chris Morgan, Bears offensive line coach. You go out, you get Nate Davis. You go out, you put Whitehair at his Pro Bowl position. Jenkins, you move him around again, but he could have been a Pro Bowler. And then now you got Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones. You have no excuse to not have at least better than, I would not say top 10, but maybe top 13. So the 13th, 14th best offensive line in the league. Yeah. Why not? You have all the talent, and then you have debt on top of it. I don't know. Chris Morgan's a little bit on a hotter seat for an assistant kind of style coach. Yeah. But it is important, especially for Bears fans, especially using our first round pick on an offensive lineman. There needs to be development quickly there for Darnell Wright. I do want to go back to another comment that you said really quickly. It was about Eddie Jackson. Popped in my head. Didn't want to lose the thought. Is Eddie Jackson didn't play a full season last year. Eddie Jackson had 80 tackles. Yep. Eddie Jackson had 4 interceptions.
Yep.
Eddie Jackson had almost 10 pass deflections in not even a full season. He easily could have been a Pro Bowler last year. And I think that he plays so well in Alan Williams' defense, considering Alan Williams is a cornerback-minded coach. I'm super pumped about Eddie Jackson too. Wanted to throw that out there because I didn't want to lose that thought. But he was having a monster season before he got hurt. Thanks a lot, MetLife Stadium. Like
he gets to play for free, man. He gets to play free. That's what Eddie wants to do. He's not Eddie's never going to be a wrap-up tackle guy. He's never going to be the perfect, I can cover a guy for however long you need me. He's not. He's going to be the dude that's like, ball, and just goes and gets it. Like, you know what I mean? And that's what we want him to be. That's why we like him.
He's a dog with a squirrel. He just goes out and gets the ball. He just chases after it as fast as he can. But man, it's going to be a fun season. I know that, you guys over at ESPN 1000 and Windy City Breeze, you guys are talking about it. I think we're all on the same page from a creator standpoint that the Bears are going to be better next year.
That's the only option. Like
it's the only option. It has to be. But from a point of view, this team is going to be better. I mean, on paper, they're a ton better. It's just how is training camp going to go? We're going to be covering that. You and I are going to be at camp. Hopefully we cross paths every now and then. But, very, very excited about it. But Pat, you're the man as always. Everyone, I'm putting Pat's, everywhere you can find him. Make sure you go follow him. I love his stuff. He's the one that helped make this channel what it is today. So got to give him a shout out there. But Pat, thank you so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it and hope to have you on again soon.
I appreciate it, bro. Anytime, man. Let me know. And I'm always down to support creators who are growing in the right way, man.
And we'll have to do a Chicago handshake together, just so everyone knows that you and I will actually do a Chicago handshake. Yeah, it's a Sunday, so it hurts a little bit to say. Yeah. But if I said it to you on a Thursday or Friday, I think you might be like, all right,
It's here's the tough part that people don't realize. You got to start your night with it or your night's screwed. If you end your night with a Chicago handshake, you're done. Yeah, you got to start your night with it.
You won't remember anything before that handshake, and you won't remember anything after. But if you have the handshake at the beginning, you have a slight chance of remembering 50% of the night. And only the good parts. It's got that weird chemical reaction in your brain where you forget about the bad, and you're like, oh yeah, that happened. And then you look at your credit card bill, you go, how many handshakes did I get?
Yeah, so, that's the tough part. You paid for all of them, actually. That's the tough part.
Yeah, if you're dishing them, you're paying for all of them. No one's Venmoing you or anything to cover their Chicago handshake. That's not agreed upon. So.
Hey man, that's the finest Chicago River water was used to make that.
It's at the distillery right now. They don't even filter it. But but Pat, thanks again for coming on, man. Really appreciate it and looking forward to next time.
Always, man. Appreciate you.
And with that, thank you very much for joining this episode of Just Another Year Chicago. My name is Nick Rody, joined alongside Pat the Designer, and we'll see you guys next time.